Hello everyone, this week we will explore how to paint the cityscape using watercolors. Welcome to my home studio, where I share my passion for watercolor paintings. My name is Dinesh. Today we will learn how to paint a cityscape in watercolor. We will dive into techniques for simplifying intricate building details, analyzing our reference photo to understand the composition, and approaching the scene by thinking in terms of shapes. Additionally, we will explore how to capture the essence of cityscape while achieving a sense of realism in our painting. Before we dive in, be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our ever-growing creative community. Now, without further ado, let's get started, everyone. So this is the first step I usually do before I starting my painting, is just analyzing my reference and thinking how can I simplify this scene in order to capture the essence of this reference and painting it on watercolors. It is overwhelming when you paint cityscape like this. Again, you don't have to paint exactly as it is, and that's how I paint. I try to capture the essence of it and try to put my own spin on it. As far as the supply goes, I'm using Bowang watercolor paper, 300 GSM, a rough surface, and you can use any watercolor paper you want. And for the paints, I'm using Winsor Newton professional grade watercolor paints because it gives a really nice vibrancy. And again, you can use any watercolor paints you want. And the first step is just sketching in watercolors. And this step is essential in watercolors because watercolors known for the transparency. So what I mean by that is it's not an opaque medium, so you can't like go and paint on top of over it. Whereas if you want to do that, because in watercolors you start with the lightest wash, you slowly build up the washes to the darkest wash. So once you go darker, it will be really hard to bring it down. You could use white paint to bring it down, but if you want to do that, might as well use gouache, acrylic, or oil. When it comes to sketching, I usually think about splitting my watercolor paper in 1/3. So I put the horizon or the building in the foreground all the way at the top. So then using that, I usually constantly compare with other buildings. So the main big shape in my reference is the one in the foreground, and the one next on the left hand side is another big shape, and the third big shape is the building which is sitting exactly in the middle and on the left. So these are the four big major shapes I would like to capture as close as possible. The rest I can paint as a nearly as a shape. And for the eyelets, when you paint a cityscape like this, and I usually think about my eyelets, so that's really important. So I started with a little bit of pale blue at the top. I'm using Cerulean Blue, and I'm using warming up the wash as it comes down to the horizon. For that, I'm using a little bit of cadmium red. Again, I'm using really less pigment and more water in my brush. The reason being is this is just to stain the wash. It's not about we are putting the color exactly as it is. So I just painted the sky, so now I have a value of a sky. From that I can constantly compare from the value from that to other things. So this the background building which is in distance. When I paint background buildings, I usually think about in a mirror shape. What shape is it? How fast I can block that shape. So I'm using a little bit of cobalt blue for that. And again, now I'm focusing on the mid shape. And again, if you see in the reference, it looks a little bit lighter, but in my painting it looks a little bit vibrant and darker. And you'll be surprised since watercolor goes a little bit dull. And even if you want to reduce the wash, you could use white paint or water to bring it down. And you can see at the top, I want the silhouette to read well, so that's why I made it a little bit darker, and I'm using a little bit of white paint to bring it down. So I also combined that shape with the building in the foreground as well. And you can see that when I'm doing it, I'm trying to constantly leave some eyelets here and there. Again, I don't want to make everything blue. Some I made a little bit of amber, and some I'm going to use a little bit of a neutral tint on it. So just trying to mix different colors here and there, because so it doesn't look we are just using one single color on it. And that also gives a little bit of kills some monotonous in our painting. It also gives a color variations in a cityscape as well. And this is the fourth major big shape I was talking about. And again, think about when I paint this, I think about I'm painting the light first. Then I'll add the shadow and the darker value on top of it. And that's what I was trying to do now. So just to see where everything sits. And even for the trees, I'm using a little bit of Winsor yellow and a little bit of green in it. And I'm also trying to mix a little bit of yellow ochre and burnt sienna here and there. Again, whenever I put a color, I try to have a little bit of color variation. And you can see that I also use that green at the back as well. So now I'm using the buildings which is in the foreground. And again, I'm trying to midground. I'm trying to have a color variations. I used burnt sienna and I used neutral tint. And in the foreground, I'm using a little bit of neutral tint with a little bit of violet in it. So again, and you can see that the amount of color variations I introduced while I was painting the midground. And this is the most important shape because this is a bigger shape that's going to be popping in our reference. So I want to make sure that I try as close as possible. So one thing in reality, when you go out and see anything, then reality is subtleties. So what I mean by that, the colors which exist in reality, it's not a color. It's usually the lightest gray of that color. Even though the reference will look a little bit grayish, and I'm trying to introduce a little bit of vibrancy in my painting. So that I want to do it. Even if I want to reduce the vibrancy, I will just glaze over a neutral tint on top of it to bring it a little bit of gray. So again, whenever I paint in watercolors, when I see a lot of watercolors when they paint, their painting looks dull because they don't have any vibrancy. Everything looks dull, everything looks the same wash, and the values doesn't align. So everything is on the same value. And you can see that now I want to go and introduce a little bit of darker tones in the midground, and this also helps me to shape the building and try to capture the eyelet on the building on the midground, and which is the really important building. And again, I made the building a little bit darker at the background, and that also helps to frame the building which is in the foreground and the midground as well. And I'm trying to add the details here and there. Again, whenever I paint, I think about how can I capture this detail in a one single stroke. That's what I was thinking about. Even if I make anything wrong, I will still keep on going at it, because again, it's my painting. I like to express how I want it. And now I'm introducing a little bit of a darker tone, and you can see that even though it looked darker in the midground, you can see that how lighter it got. The one thing I usually keep in mind while I paint is things which are cooler go in distance, which things which are warmer comes in closer. So a lot of painters, master painters, use this technique to create depth, and that's what I was trying to do as well. And now I'm using the foreground building. Again, the foreground is really hard, like which is on the bottom left, and this perspective is quite difficult to do it. And again, whenever I see something really challenging, I'll simplify it. I won't paint as it is. I'll put my own spin on it and try to capture everything as it is. Again, even when I do that, I usually constantly think about comparing the sizes and everything. Even though I made the building at the bottom a little bit bigger, and once I compared with other buildings, it looked lighter. And this is the road. For that, I'm using a lot of warmer tone. And you can see that I used the light. Now I'm going to be using the shadow as per se. And you can, as in the beginning, as I said, I paint light first, then I add the shadows, and that's how I constantly think about it in watercolors, because it's easy for layering, because it's kind of like a really nice approach to paint while you paint a lot of difficult things like this. And you can see that just by adding that a little bit of value on top of it, it helps to show the forms a little bit better on the building. So now I'm going to be adding the details. Again, the details, as I said, try to paint details in one single stroke as possible. And I realized that when I did this building, I made a mistake. And there's only three There is only 3 shapes till the top, but I made 4 shapes. Again, even though it's 4 shapes, but still I went with my vision and I kept painting. Even though when I show this painting to someone, and they would think that I painted as it is. And now I'm adding the darker value as per say the shadows and the values of it. And you can see that as soon as we add the darker values on top of it, things start appearing in place. And the most importantly is showing lighting and shadows. In order to create a contrast in a watercolor painting or any kind of painting I do, I try to create a contrast. So how we can create a contrast is just by painting light and shadows. Again, even in light and shadows, the lightest light is white, and it will be a lighter color from that, and there is a darkest dark is the shadows. Even in shadows, there is mid-tones, the mid-gray of shadows, and there's also darkest dark shadows. And again, when I paint shadows, there's another thing I keep in my mind is painting shadows in distance, I make it lighter, but as it comes closer, I make it darker, and that's how I paint. And you can see that I painted the top part of it, even though it looks different in my reference. And again, if I show this painting, and people will believe that this exists in this place. Again, I'm trying to capture the essence of it, not copying as it is. And this is kind of like a mid-tone value I add on my trees. When it comes to trees, because trees are upright planes in reality have a darker value than rest of the painting. And you can see that once we add the mid-tone value, I kind of added another darker value at the bottom of it because it's underneath the shadows. And I'm adding that building which is sitting in the bottom of it. And now I'm focusing on the foreground building. Again, this is City Hall. It's in Toronto, which is near Nathan Phillips Square, and I was there. They had open doors, and I was able to once a year people can go upstairs and see this city view. So I want to capture that. And again, I'm constantly thinking, how can I show that? How can I show the detail in really as fast as I can? That's what I was trying to do. So there's another trick I use while painting is thinking everything in shapes. I don't think about that I'm painting a building, I'm painting a car, I'm painting a tree. I think about what shape is it. Is it a square shape or round shape? I'll think about in basic primitives as possible. And you can see I made the tree behind it which is darker because that will help us to frame this building even further. And I'm trying to create a texture here and there, and I'm trying to capture the shape as close as possible. And these are the people in the road, and I'm also adding the shadows for the tree which is also sitting at the bottom as well. And one thing I noticed that my building looked a little bit dull, and it doesn't look that much pale. And what I did is I used the same color amber, and I used a little bit of neutral tint to gray it up, and it kind of looks like there's a little bit of atmosphere happening in my thing. And I'm adding the shadows for the top part here and there, and adding the details in the foreground building which is at the bottom of it. I'll call this done. I don't want to overdo it, and trying to add details by squinting my eyes wherever it's necessary. And this is how the painting looks like. Now it's your turn. Take my reference or use your own reference and apply the techniques what I've showed today. And cityscape like this, there is a tendency of overworking the details and everything. It's all about capturing the lighting and shadows and capturing the subtleties and creating depth. Thank you once again for watching this painting tutorial. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the video in the comment section below. If you have any other watercolor related topics, reach out to me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or leave a comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our learning community. By subscribing, you will receive weekly upload notifications and stay updated on our channel. And share with your fellow artists, friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.